So we're here this evening. We're looking at this conversation around can patriotism and diversity coexist together. We've got some really brave young people who've come to represent different people and views, and it's going to be great.
So I think generally a person on an individual level can identify as being patriotic as a product of diversity as opposed to in spite of it. But I think that the extent to which diversity and patriotism can coexist in a country is determined by the history of cultural and religious development. So if you look at France, because I did quite a lot of research into French patriotism, and we can look at the ultra-nationalist French political party, the Patriotes, established in 2017. And we can see how French patriotism in a Eurolinguistic light is often conflated with nationalism. And I wanted to ask myself why this is, why there is this intolerance of diversity. And I think we have to look into the French Revolution from 1789, which created a culture that heavily insisted on and promoted this homogenous unity of people. And I think a great example of that is the 2024 Olympics hosted in Paris in 2024 in summer, in which those competing for the French national team were prohibited from wearing hijabs. So there's this blatant rejection of diversity to uphold this patriotic notion.
A more productive outlook on patriotism focuses on a celebration of culture, because that's something that is contemporary and present and happening all the time, and British culture cannot exist without diversity. It does exist without diversity. And the same way I'm patriotic about going to the pub and having a Sunday lunch, I'm patriotic about having been able to go to my friends' bat mitzvahs and, my friends saying like, mashallah to me before an exam. And it's like one of the greatest parts of British identity is the diversity that is held within the scope of the country. Yeah.
Just to add to that, if we take London as an example, we have people of many faiths that live together and work together. We have Christians that celebrate Christmas, we have Muslims that celebrate Eid, Jewish that celebrate Hanukkah. And we may celebrate differently, but at the end of the day, we are all British. And our pride in our country isn't something that conflicts us with tradition. It's something that's strengthened by them. And I think diversity isn't a weakness. Rather, it's the very thing that makes unity beautiful, especially in a country like Britain.
I'll enjoy this. I guess I'd love to hear as well the differences of the faith perspective as well as the not having a faith perspective of how does that feed into patriotism and how does that help? Like you've really well put, how does it help unity or in fact, sometimes how would it hinder that sense of unity as well? Would you like to say something?
For me, I think when looking at it from a point of view from faith, especially my faith, like in my faith, it's taught like to be loving of everybody. So from that point of view, I think that it'll be very easy for patriotism and diversity to coexist. But at the same time, I also think that in today's world, patriotism can quickly like the line between patriotism and nationalism can quickly be like blurred. I think for this question, it's very important to understand the difference between patriotism and nationalism, because patriotism is supposed to be like healthy, like pride in your country and like a love for your country, and nationalism is believing like your country is superior. And I don't think like nationalism, when patriotism turns into nationalism, I don't think that can work, because I think in today's society there are many organizations who like hide behind like patriotism when putting out nationalist views which are like exclusatory and racist, and I think that goes against the values of equality and diversity. Anyway, I think that seeing this like clear difference shows people that when the line is blurred, patriotism and patriotism and diversity can't coexist, but when the line is not blurred and patriotism is love for your country and like the shared culture of all the people who have come into the country and like all their shared ideas, I think then it can work, especially from a Christian point of view. Loving everybody is like, to me, very easy to understand.
Any additions? Please.
I think this is less of a statement that I have, maybe a question for everyone as well. But like, so when we're talking about, because quite frankly, I had no clue about, I didn't think about nationalism, but is there like, as we're sharing a space, for example, like, is there, I'm better at analogies. So for example, this room has like tables, right? And so in my head, I'm picturing like, maybe let's say, because for argument's sake, religions, maybe there's Christians on this table. So what are there lines? Are there boundaries? Are there things? Is there too far? Is there not enough of someone contributing to a country with your faith and your like religion? I don't know if that question makes sense, but like everyone has a table, and who's to say that there's a few too many people at a table, right? Is that a thing? Is that something that we should think about, or are there rules to how much someone should or shouldn't share when it comes to having personal belief or something like that? I don't have the answer, so I wanted to.
Can I extend that into saying it's a question that you're asking in terms of what are the limitations of almost being patriotic towards your faith, and what does that cause? If that causes any exclusivity or like isolatingness of people's beliefs, or does that take people away from actually taking pride in their country because they're separate because of their set beliefs? Yeah, right. Any ideas?
From an Islamic perspective, the Quran teaches us that we believe that in Islam, diversity is a part of God's design, and it's something to be celebrated rather than feared. Example, in our holy book, it says, I'm going to say the Arabic, I'm going to say English after that. يا أيها الناس إنا خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. This translates to, O mankind, we created you from a male and a female and made you into nations and tribes that you may know one another. So for us, it doesn't really matter what faith you are. We're not going to reject you, rather accept you. You need some. Good. Perfect.
Anything else?
So I want to think about this question, like if we are all living in a one house and as siblings, and we need to go and follow the rules of the parents of that house. So if we think as a country like this, and we are brothers and sisters, and we don't, and as long as we follow the rules of the country, of the house, of the parents, and just we might have different tastes, we might have different interests, but we are living together. So we need to have that understanding and just the way of finding that kind of bridge, that kind of way of communicating with each other, not just like putting walls and not accepting each other, and not just, well, it's not just the challenge that comes from the diversity and patriotism. It's actually the challenge is about just, it's a misunderstanding of each other, that we need to put that away and just trying to see ourselves and our people in our community, in our country as siblings, that we need to find our own ways to communicate with one another. So this is my type of view.
Fabulous. Anything else to input? Any other additions? Cool. I guess in that same conversation then, what are the limitations that we're seeing then? What can this sort of maybe look at nationalism, or the look of taking too much pride in something that becomes your full identity? What does that limit? How does that affect diversity, and how does that maybe limit our capacity to be able to accept diversity like we've expressed on this table?
So I would like to discuss both, like how, again with France, both how Britain and France were imperial nations, Britain had established its Commonwealth in 1949. France had the French Union in 1946. So both were essentially exposed to migration and therefore cultural pluralism. And I think that on the one hand, while Britain was far more like encouraging of economic migration, we can see that with the British Nationality Act of 1948. I think France was more for like the assimilation of migrants, and again we can see that with the with the rejection of diversity in France, with burqas and niqabs being prohibited. And I think also with post 15th Amendment America, patriotism and diversity were in conflict with each other. We have anti-racist activists such as W.E.B. Du Bois, who founded the NAACP. He had his US passport removed from him. So there's this civil punishment of anti-racist, anti-colonial activists who refuse to adhere to the restrictions imposed on them by this American patriotic notion. And I think that's a really good example of how patriotism and racism or xenophobia can be conflated depending on the period of time or the cultural history. And now looking forward into Britain with the rise of the far right rhetoric, which I think weaponizes patriotism in order to spread this xenophobic, racist hate. And I think maybe this is more of a question for like the table or just for anyone. I'm not sure if I can say that patriotism is inextricable completely from xenophobia or racism with its historical meaning. Yeah.
I mean, that's fantastic. I guess that leads into a really nice segue of conversation here. And I'd love to hear from everyone on the table for this as well. Continuing the great point that you made, I guess, is we're seeing this growing sense of division between people, especially with this growing nationalist views and right-wing thoughts. I guess I'd love to know a bit from you, two young people who might be watching this as well. What do you hope for the future, and what do you think that this argument brings, and for young people later down the years?
Diversity doesn't undermine a country. Diversity can make a nation stronger by combining different perspectives from all over the world. I think that the idea of the idea that's being portrayed that diversity isn't a good thing is just completely wrong. Because without diversity, what would this country be? Because this country is built off other people's cultures and stuff like that. So by combining and celebrating diversity, young people could start to learn that diversity is always a good thing. And I think with young people, more young people today, especially with social media on the rise, I think there's a lot that could be done to celebrate diversity in different ways, even if it's just school events or youth projects, social media campaigns that can highlight different cultures and religions and stories within the nation and all nations. Yeah, so that's what I hope for the future can happen.
Yeah, kind of saying on that one. Talk my point. No, I think when I think about the question and just everything that we've said, I think there's a lot of rigid thoughts. Let's just say that there's a lot of rigidity.
Yep, that's good.
Yeah, good word. Okay, so that's validation. Thank you. I think there's a lot of that around when we think about patriotism, and I think there's something, and I hope that young people start I hope we continue to adopt the sort of being more fluid with our thoughts, not necessarily like thinking anything that you want or doing anything you want in that sense, but also just like having an open mind, not necessarily adopting everything that you see and you hear and you want to believe, but like having an open mind, observing someone's culture, observing and going to someone's events and understanding why they do things and maybe how they do things or whatever it is, and having that understanding, having that knowledge that we've spoken about. Because I think there's something in having your own identity, but also understanding why someone has their points of view and why they do certain things. I just hope we're a little bit more open-minded. We don't jump to a conclusion without understanding the full breadth of what someone is and what they do and what they celebrate and what they believe.
I think we need to challenge the stereotypes. We need to break down the barriers. We have to celebrate our difference rather than conflict over them. And what I think about the future, I imagine a country where patriotism is about contribution, not exclusion. And we should measure the love for our country not by who we keep out, but how much we give back as a country as a whole.
I haven't really thought much about like what steps to take. I just think discussions are the most important. Having discussions, listening to each other. That's all I can really say.
Fantastic. This is really good. I guess we're sort of coming into the close of this discussion, but I'd love to hear, particularly around your place in culture as a young person. If someone was to come to you and say, what role do you play specifically in the things that you carry with your faith or with where you live, but thinking specifically around Islington and the area that we live in, if you're approached and asked this, what would be your thing? What would you say? And what would you say that your role is within this conversation?
I think a big one for me, I've been there maybe like 5 years, let's say. And I think for me, it's a lot about learning. A lot of situations I've seen people I've spoken to, I haven't related to their situation at all, really. And so for me, it's been a big, like I said, like earlier on previously, a lot of it is being fluid with how I listen to people, understand where they're coming from and why they say the things they say, do the things they say, act the way they do. So yeah, I think my contribution hasn't necessarily been contribution. It's been more like a mirror. I like to think of someone saying something to me or me seeing an action and me understand it and then not reflect it because that's not always good. But being able to say maybe back, okay, this is kind of what I see in your action, or maybe this is something that I've seen that you guys do. What do you agree? Do you disagree? What kind of things happen in my circle? A little bit like a mirror.
I think that as a Jewish studies and Hebrew teacher, I really try to involve the topic of diversity in my teaching, learning about the different types of Jews around the world. I myself am Algerian and Afghani. I have Polish, and I think learning about like the Sephardi Jews, Ashkenazi, Mizrahi, it's so important because I think in each religion, diversity has such a prominent like impact. And
I think something I hope to see is a Britain where whether you're a Muslim, a Sikh, a Christian, or anyone else, you can say, this is my home and I'm proud of it. And I want young people of all backgrounds to feel equally valued and included as well. And to get there, we have to have understanding and education. And just to finish off, a garden with only one type of flower might be nice, but a garden with many different types of flowers, of many different types, many different species is beautiful.
Fantastic. What a lovely thing to end on there as well. Come on, that is fantastic. Everyone in the room, can we give these young people a big round of applause? What a joy. I can speak on behalf of everyone in the room. I know it's nerve-wracking to be here, but well done. You've brought some amazing things to the table. You've made this conversation very interesting. Thank you so much for making some time to be here this evening and to all of this.